We don't want to see your face at her graduation. My mother screamed through my laptop screen, her voice cutting through the Zoom call like a blade through my chest. The words hung in the digital air between us, poisonous and final. This wasn't how celebration planning was supposed to go. We were meant to coordinate travel arrangements for my little sister Emma's college graduation, but instead I sat staring at three family faces united in their rejection of me. The irony burned deep because for 3 years I had been their financial lifeline, secretly funding not just Emma's education, but every comfort my parents enjoyed. They accessed credit cards and accounts behind my back, living off my generosity while treating me like an unwanted stranger. 3 years earlier, everything seemed different. I remember the day I got the call from my dad, Derek, his voice shaking as he explained they were 30 days from foreclosure on our family home in Akron, Ohio. The factory where he had worked for 18 years had closed permanently, another casualty of manufacturing moving overseas. My mother, Linda, was picking up part-time shifts at a department store, but her earnings barely covered groceries, let alone a mortgage payment. That same week, I had just accepted a software engineering position with a tech company in Seattle. The salary was more money than our family had ever seen, and I knew immediately what I had to do. Within 2 months, I had moved my parents and sister from their foreclosure-threatened house to a comfortable 3-bedroom rental just 20 minutes from my new apartment. I paid the security deposit first and last month's rent and covered the moving expenses without hesitation. Emma was a junior at Ohio State then, pursuing pre-med with the kind of determination that made me proud to call her my sister. She had always been the academic star of our family, earning scholarships that covered most of her tuition. But gaps remained, and with our parents struggling, those remaining balances became my responsibility. I gladly took them on because Emma's dreams mattered more than my own financial comfort. The transition to Washington seemed like a fresh start for everyone. Derek began looking for work in manufacturing or warehouse operations. Linda found a part-time position at a local retail chain and seemed to enjoy the change of scenery. Emma continued her studies remotely during the semester break, planning to return to Ohio for her final year. I felt like I had rescued my family from financial disaster and given them a foundation for rebuilding their lives. But the requests never stopped. First came the medical bills when Linda started experiencing anxiety attacks and needed therapy sessions that insurance wouldn't fully cover. Then Derek needed money for job interview clothing and transportation costs as he searched for employment. Car repairs became my problem when their aging sedan required a new transmission. Emergency dental work for my mother turned into another several $1,000 expense. Each request arrived with tears, stress, and detailed explanations of why they couldn't handle the cost themselves. Linda would call me sobbing about how the financial pressure was affecting her health. Derek would apologize profusely while explaining how unemployment benefits weren't enough to cover basic living expenses. Emma would text me worried messages about our parents' stress levels and how grateful she was that I could help when she couldn't. I never questioned these needs because they seemed legitimate. My parents had always lived paycheck to paycheck, and their recent upheaval made ongoing financial struggles completely reasonable. I wanted to be the son who could provide stability and security for people I loved. Creating shared credit card accounts seemed practical, allowing them to handle emergency expenses without the embarrassment of calling me for every purchase. But 2 days before our graduation planning Zoom call, I decided to review all my financial accounts to budget appropriately for Emma's celebration. Seattle offered expensive hotels and restaurants, and I wanted to ensure I could cover whatever costs emerged for her special weekend. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and my laptop pulling up credit card statements I hadn't examined closely in months. The first unusual charge caught my attention immediately: Romano's Italian Bistro, $187. I knew this restaurant because my coworkers had taken me there for my birthday. The prices were steep, definitely not the kind of place my budget-conscious parents would choose during tight financial times. But maybe they had celebrated some good news, perhaps Derek finding employment. Then I found another high-end dinner, Sullivan's Steakhouse, $243. And another, the Ocean View Grill, $196. These weren't celebration meals, but regular occurrences happening twice per week for the past several months. Each charge represented more than my parents claimed to spend on groceries for an entire week. My confusion turned to disbelief as I scrolled further. Designer handbags from Nordstrom, premium electronics from Best Buy, expensive wine from specialty shops, spa treatments, luxury bedding sets, high-end kitchen appliances. The pattern was unmistakable, systematic luxury spending on credit cards I provided for emergencies during months when my parents claimed they were surviving on pasta and canned vegetables. The most shocking discovery came when I cross-referenced these purchases with dates I remembered clearly. The $200 spa day happened the same week Linda called me crying about not being able to afford her anxiety medication. The designer purse purchase occurred 3 days after Derek asked me to cover their utility bill because unemployment wasn't enough for basic expenses. The expensive wine and gourmet food charges happened throughout the month. They told Emma they were eating simple meals to save money. I sat staring at thousands of dollars in luxury purchases made while my parents portrayed themselves as struggling survivors, barely getting by on my charity. The betrayal wasn't just financial, but emotional, built on elaborate lies designed to maintain my sympathy and support. Every tear my mother shed about money stress was calculated manipulation. Every apology my father offered about needing help was strategic theater. But the pattern revealed something even more disturbing: careful planning. These weren't impulsive purchases made during momentary weakness. The charges were spread across multiple cards, kept below amounts that might trigger alerts, and timed to coincide with their sob stories about financial hardship. My parents had developed a sophisticated system for exploiting my generosity while maintaining their victim narrative. As I compiled evidence of their deception, I felt something cold settling in my chest where warmth for my family used to live. They weren't struggling survivors who needed temporary help. They were manipulators who had found their perfect target in a successful son who loved them enough to sacrifice his own financial security for their comfort. The graduation planning call suddenly made sense as their latest performance another opportunity to extract money while portraying themselves as grateful but overwhelmed parents. I wondered how long they had planned to continue this charade and what other lies they had constructed to justify their ongoing fraud. The graduation planning call started exactly at 7 p.m. on Sunday evening, with Emma's excited face filling my laptop screen as she connected from her dorm room in Columbus. Her joy was infectious as she shared details about her upcoming ceremony, the academic honors she had earned, and her excitement about finally completing her undergraduate degree. She looked radiant with accomplishment, and my pride in her achievements felt genuine despite my recent discoveries about our parents. Derek and Linda joined from their living room, sitting together on the couch I had helped them buy during their first month in Washington. Linda wore a sweater I now recognize from my credit card statements, a designer piece that cost more than most people spend on a week of groceries. Derek sported a new haircut from what I suspected was an expensive salon, given the precise styling that differed dramatically from his usual barbershop look. "I cannot believe my baby girl is finally graduating," Linda gushed, dabbing at tears that seemed rehearsed. "It feels like yesterday you were starting kindergarten, and now look at you about to become a doctor." Emma laughed, correcting her gently. "Medical school comes next, Mom. I still have 4 more years after this graduation. But I'm so grateful for all the support you and Dad and Charlie have given me. None of this would be possible without family backing me up." Derek nodded solemnly, playing his role perfectly. "Your mother and I have sacrificed everything to make sure you and your brother could have opportunities we never had. Even when times got tough, we never stopped believing in your potential. I listened to this performance with newly educated ears, recognizing the manipulation tactics they had perfected over years of practice. Every statement reinforced their narrative as selfless parents who deserved gratitude and continued support. They positioned themselves as Emma's primary supporters, while acknowledging my contributions only as an afterthought. Emma began discussing logistics for graduation weekend, sharing information about ceremony times, guest parking, and restaurant reservations she hoped to make for a celebration dinner. Her enthusiasm was genuine and heartwarming, but I found myself calculating the costs she mentioned: flights for our parents' hotel rooms, for the weekend rental cars, expensive dining, and various graduation-related expenses. I opened a private chat window and sent my parents a message. Before we finalize expensive plans, I need to discuss some unusual charges on the shared accounts. Can we talk about recent purchases privately? Linda's expression shifted immediately, her celebratory mood evaporating as she read my message. Derek glanced at her nervously, clearly understanding the implications of my question. The comfortable family dynamic became tense within seconds, though Emma continued planning excitedly, unaware of the undercurrent developing between her parents and me. Linda typed back, "I don't know what you're talking about. We've only used those cards for necessities like you said we could." I responded with specific details. Romano's Italian Bistro, $187. Nordstrom handbag, $312. Sullivan Steakhouse, $243. These don't seem like necessities during financial hardship. Derek shifted uncomfortably on camera, looking like he wanted to flee the conversation entirely. Linda's face flushed red, but instead of embarrassment, I saw anger building in her expression. She had been caught in her lie, and rather than acknowledging the deception, she was preparing to attack me for discovering it. "Are you seriously monitoring our every purchase like we're children?" Linda snapped, her voice loud enough to interrupt Emma's planning monologue. "After everything we've been through, you're going to nickel and dime us over a few meals." Emma stopped mid-sentence, confused by the sudden shift in tone. "What's going on? Is something wrong?" I tried to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "I'm not monitoring anyone. I was reviewing accounts to budget for graduation expenses and found some purchases that seemed inconsistent with the financial struggles you've described to me." "Inconsistent?" Linda's voice rose higher, her performance shifting from confused innocence to righteous indignation. "We've been living like refugees since moving to this expensive state because of your career. We gave up our home, our friends, our entire support system to follow you across the country. And now you're interrogating us about eating decent food occasionally." Derek attempted to calm the situation. "Linda, maybe we should discuss this privately after the call. Emma doesn't need to hear about financial stress during her graduation planning." But Linda was fully committed to her attack strategy, now realizing that deflection and guilt manipulation were her only options for maintaining control of the narrative. "No, Derek. I'm tired of walking on eggshells around our own son. Charlie has become completely paranoid and controlling since he started making good money. He acts like we're criminals for needing help after losing everything." Emma looked stricken, watching her family celebration dissolve into bitter conflict. "Charlie, what's this about? Are you upset that Mom and Dad spent money on something nice? They've been struggling for years. Don't they deserve to enjoy themselves a little bit?" This was the moment my heart broke completely. Emma, the sister I had sacrificed so much to support, automatically sided with our parents without understanding the scope of their deception. She had been fed their victim narrative so consistently that my legitimate concerns about fraud seemed like selfish nitpicking to her. "Emma, it's not about one nice meal," I explained carefully. "It's about thousands of dollars in luxury purchases made while they told me they couldn't afford basic necessities. They've been lying about their financial situation while using credit cards I provided for emergencies." Linda seized the opportunity to escalate further. "Lying? How dare you accuse us of lying? We've been grateful for every penny of help, but we're not going to live like prisoners because you want to control every aspect of our lives. You moved us away from everything familiar, isolated us in an expensive city where we know nobody, and now you want to dictate how we survive the situation you created. Emma's expression shifted as she processed her mother's words. I could see her reframing recent conversations, remembering complaints about Seattle's cost of living stories, about feeling isolated and dependent, subtle criticisms of my expectations and attitude. Linda had been planting seeds for months, preparing Emma to see me as the problem rather than the solution. Charlie, I had no idea you were making Mom and Dad feel this controlled, Emma said softly. I know you've been generous, but they're grown adults who deserve dignity and respect. Maybe you have gotten a little too focused on money since moving to Seattle. Success can change people sometimes. The betrayal was complete. My beloved sister, whose education I was funding, whose dreams I had prioritized over my own financial security, had been turned against me by parents who were systematically defrauding me. Every sacrifice I made was being reframed as controlling behavior. Every act of love was being painted as manipulation. Linda sensed her victory and pressed her advantage. Emma's right. You've lost sight of what family means, Charlie. You've become obsessed with money and power, treating us like charity cases instead of people who raised you and loved you. If you can't support your sister's graduation with a generous heart, then maybe you shouldn't come at all. Derek nodded reluctantly, adding his voice to the chorus against me. Son, I think you need to step back and consider how your attitude is affecting the family. Emma's graduation should be about celebrating her accomplishments, not arguing over finances. Emma looked directly at me through the camera, her disappointment clear and devastating. Charlie, I'm embarrassed by how you're treating our parents. They gave up everything to support your career move, and this is how you repay their sacrifice. Maybe Mom's right. If you're going to bring this kind of negative energy to my graduation, I'd rather you didn't come. The words hit me like physical blows. My sister, whom I loved more than my own success, had just agreed that I should be excluded from her graduation because I discovered our parents were stealing from me. The manipulation was so complete that questioning their fraud made me the villain in her story. Linda smiled with cold satisfaction, knowing she had achieved her goal of isolating me from Emma's support. We don't want to see your face at her graduation, she declared with finality. Maybe when you learn to appreciate your family properly, we can have a healthy relationship again. The call ended with my family united against me, leaving me staring at a black screen while processing the complete destruction of relationships I had treasured and protected for years. I sat in the silence of my apartment for exactly 17 minutes after the call ended, staring at my reflection in the dark laptop screen while my mind processed the magnitude of what had just occurred. My family hadn't just rejected me. They had made me the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. The manipulation was so sophisticated that my own sister believed I was the problem. But as the initial shock wore off, something cold and resolute settled in my chest. If they wanted to paint me as controlling and paranoid, I would give them a demonstration of what those characteristics actually looked like. If they believed I was obsessed with money, they were about to discover exactly how much my financial support had meant to their comfortable lifestyle. I opened my laptop and began methodically documenting every transaction, every lie, every instance where my kindness had been exploited for their luxury purchases. Screenshots of credit card statements, dates of their sob story phone calls, matched with evidence of expensive purchases, records of every tuition payment, every rent check, every emergency expense I had covered while they lived like wealthy people on my dime. My first call was to my primary bank, where I spoke with a customer service representative named Patricia, who listened patiently as I explained my need to review account security and remove authorized users from multiple financial products. Within 20 minutes, I had changed passwords, security questions, and recovery information for every account my parents had ever accessed. Next came the credit card companies. Chase, American Express, Discover, and Visa all received similar calls as I reported unauthorized usage by people who no longer had permission to access my accounts. I requested immediate card cancellations and replacement cards sent only to my address with new numbers my parents would never see. The conversation with my auto pay service provider was particularly satisfying. 3 years of automatic rent payments to my parents' landlord's cell phone bills for a family plan that included their devices, insurance premiums for their car, and health coverage, and subscription services they enjoyed but never paid for themselves. Every recurring payment was canceled effective immediately. But the most impactful cancellation was Emma's tuition autopay scheduled to process her final semester payment in 2 weeks. The university's billing department confirmed the cancellation while informing me that without payment, Emma would not be permitted to participate in graduation ceremonies. They offered to place her account on hold pending alternative payment arrangements, but emphasized the approaching deadline for degree completion requirements. As I worked through this systematic dismantling of my financial support, a credit monitoring alert appeared on my phone. New credit inquiries had been run on my Social Security number within the past week. My stomach dropped as I realized this pattern suggested additional financial activity I hadn't discovered yet. I called the credit monitoring service and requested detailed reports from all 3 bureaus. What I found sent shockwaves through my understanding of my parents' deception. 3 separate loans had been opened in my name over the past 6 months. A personal loan from a local Washington bank for $15,000, a home improvement loan from a national lender for $12,000, and a line of credit from a credit union for $8,000. The applications contained forged signatures and used my personal information, including my Social Security number, employment details, and financial data that my parents had access to through shared living arrangements and their presence on some of my accounts as emergency contacts. They had committed identity theft on a massive scale, stealing my creditworthiness to fund undisclosed projects. Further investigation revealed the purpose of these loans. My parents had been secretly purchasing a house back in Ohio. Real estate records showed Derek and Linda as buyers of a 3-bedroom ranch home in their old neighborhood, with settlement scheduled for the week after Emma's graduation. They had planned to abandon me in Seattle once Emma completed her education, using stolen money to reestablish their independence. The home purchase explained everything about their recent behavior. The luxury spending, the gradual emotional distance, the manipulation of Emma against me, and the dramatic rejection during graduation planning. They weren't struggling victims who needed ongoing support. They were calculating criminals who had developed an exit strategy that required my financial resources but not my presence. I immediately filed police reports for identity theft with both Seattle and Ohio authorities, providing comprehensive evidence of forged loan applications and unauthorized use of my personal information. The investigating officers explained that this level of financial fraud typically resulted in federal charges, especially when crimes crossed state lines and involved substantial amounts. My attorney, recommended by a colleague who had faced similar family financial crimes, reviewed my documentation and confirmed that I had grounds for both criminal prosecution and civil recovery actions. He explained that identity theft by family members was unfortunately common, but often went unreported due to emotional complications. My decision to pursue legal action would likely result in serious consequences for my parents, including potential imprisonment. But I felt no guilt about those consequences. They had made calculated decisions to commit felony crimes against their own son while manipulating their daughter into supporting their actions. The tearful phone calls about financial stress had been performance art designed to cover systematic theft. Every expression of gratitude had been false, masking their plans to abandon me once they had extracted sufficient resources for their independence. That evening, I walked through my apartment, removing every family photo, every reminder of the people who had betrayed my trust so completely. The pictures of Emma's high school graduation family Christmas morning's vacation trips I had funded all went into a storage box that I sealed and placed in my closet. I would not be manipulated by sentiment when dealing with people who had demonstrated such complete disregard for my well-being. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from my parents, probably panicking as their credit cards were declined and automatic payments failed to process. I blocked their numbers after the fifth attempt, feeling no obligation to explain actions they had forced me to take through their own criminal behavior. The apartment felt different that night, cleaner somehow, as if removing toxic influences had created space for something healthier to grow. I ordered dinner from a restaurant I enjoyed, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving, and began planning a life that didn't revolve around supporting people who viewed my kindness as weakness to exploit. For the first time in 3 years, every dollar in my accounts belonged only to me. 2 weeks after our devastating Zoom call, Emma's world began unraveling in ways she never anticipated. She was in the middle of studying for her final exams when her phone buzzed with an urgent email from Ohio State's billing department. The subject line made her stomach drop. Immediate attention required, outstanding balance on student account. Emma opened the email with shaking hands, reading that her tuition autopay had been canceled, and her account showed a balance of $8,400 due immediately. Without payment, she would not be permitted to participate in graduation ceremonies or receive her diploma. The deadline for payment was 5 days away, barely enough time to arrange alternative funding, even if she knew where to find such money. Panic flooded through her as she realized Charlie had followed through on his threat to cancel her financial support. Her first reaction was anger at her brother's vindictive behavior, cutting off her education over what seemed like petty arguments with their parents. She called her parents, immediately sobbing as she explained the crisis threatening her graduation. Linda's response was unexpected and unsettling. Instead of immediately offering solutions or expressing outrage at Charlie's actions, her mother seemed nervous and evasive. "Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll figure something out. Maybe Charlie will come to his senses and restore the payments once he calms down." "Mom, graduation is in 5 days," Emma cried. "I can't wait for Charlie to change his mind. Do you and Dad have $8,000 to cover this? Can you get a loan or something?" The silence on the other end of the call stretched uncomfortably long. When Linda finally responded, her voice carried a strain Emma had never heard before. "Things are complicated right now, honey. Charlie has made some accusations that are causing problems with our finances. We're not sure we can access that kind of money quickly." Emma felt confused by her mother's vague responses. Throughout her college years, financial emergencies had always been resolved with quick calls to Charlie or creative solutions from her parents. This hesitation seemed completely out of character for people who had always found ways to support her education. Desperate for answers, Emma called Charlie directly for the first time since their argument. When he answered, his voice was calm but distant, completely different from the warm brother she had known her entire life. "I need to understand what's happening," Emma said without preamble. "My tuition payment was canceled, and I might not be able to graduate. What did Mom and Dad do that was so terrible you'd punish me for their mistakes?" Charlie's response was measured and factual, delivered without the emotional manipulation Emma expected. "Emma, your tuition was canceled because I discovered that our parents have been systematically defrauding me for months. They used credit cards I provided for emergencies to make thousands of dollars in luxury purchases while lying about their financial situation. They also took out loans in my name without permission, which constitutes identity theft and federal fraud." Emma felt her world shifting as Charlie provided specific details. Bank statements showing expensive restaurant meals. During weeks, her parents claimed they were eating pasta to save money, designer clothing purchases made while they requested help with utility bills, spa treatments, and luxury items bought with money obtained through elaborate sob stories about medical expenses and job search costs. "That can't be true," Emma whispered. but doubt was already creeping into her voice. She remembered her mother's new clothes, recent dinners, at expensive restaurants her parents claimed were rare treats. Home improvements they said were gifts from generous landlords. Details that hadn't seemed significant individually now formed a pattern of deception. Charlie continued with devastating precision. They also used my personal information to take out loans totaling $35,000. The money was used to buy a house in Ohio where they plan to move after your graduation. They've been planning to abandon me here while using my credit to reestablish their independence back home. Emma's phone slipped from her numb fingers as the implications hit her. Her parents hadn't just lied about money. They had committed serious crimes against Charlie while manipulating her into supporting their narrative. Every conversation where her mother portrayed Charlie as controlling and selfish had been strategic preparation for their planned abandonment. She retrieved her phone and asked the question that terrified her most. Did they manipulate me against you on purpose? Charlie's silence answered before his words did. Emma, I think you were as much a victim of their manipulation as I was. They needed you to side with them emotionally while they extracted money from me financially. Your support gave them credibility when I started questioning their stories. That evening, Emma drove to her parents' house unannounced, determined to confront them with Charlie's accusations. She found Derek and Linda in a state she had never witnessed before, genuinely panicked and arguing in harsh whispers that stopped abruptly when she entered. We need to talk, Emma said firmly. Charlie showed me evidence that you've been lying about money and stealing from him. I need you to explain what's really been happening. Linda immediately shifted into defensive mode, attempting to maintain their victim narrative. Honey Charlie has become paranoid and controlling. He's misinterpreting normal expenses as some kind of conspiracy. We've only used his help for legitimate needs. But Derek's composure cracked under Emma's direct questioning. Linda, stop. She deserves to know the truth. The police called today about identity theft charges. Federal investigators want to interview us about the loans. Charlie isn't paranoid. He's protecting himself from what we did. The admission broke Linda's facade completely. She began crying, but these tears seemed different from the calculated performances Emma now recognized from previous crises. These were tears of genuine fear and shame as she realized their criminal behavior had finally been exposed. Derek explained everything with heartbreaking honesty, how their dependence on Charlie had made them feel humiliated and powerless, how they had justified luxury purchases as compensation for sacrificing their independence, how they had planned to use Charlie's financial resources to buy their way back to Ohio without considering the impact on their relationship with him. The most devastating revelation was how deliberately they had manipulated Emma's perception of Charlie. Linda admitted to months of strategic conversations designed to make Emma see Charlie as selfish and controlling, ensuring she would emotionally support their position when conflicts emerged. Emma realized she had been groomed to be their ally against the brother who was actually sacrificing everything for her future. We thought we could get back on our feet and pay him back eventually, Derek said weakly. We never meant for it to go this far or hurt him so badly. But once we started lying, each new lie required bigger lies to cover it up. Emma stared at her parents, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in years. They weren't the struggling victims who had raised her with noble sacrifices. They were people capable of elaborate deception, criminal behavior, and emotional manipulation of their own children. The comfortable family narrative she had believed her entire life was built on systematic exploitation of Charlie's love and generosity. You made me hate him, Emma whispered. You made me choose you over the person who was actually taking care of all of us. Charlie has been paying for everything, including my education, while you convinced me he was selfish and controlling. Linda reached for her daughter desperately. Emma, we love you and Charlie both. We just made terrible mistakes because we felt so helpless. We can fix this if we all work together. But Emma stepped away from her mother's touch, finally understanding the scope of betrayal that had destroyed her family. Her graduation was 5 days away, but the celebration felt meaningless when built on such devastating deception. She needed to find Charlie and somehow repair the damage her parents had created through years of systematic lies and manipulation. Emma's graduation day dawned bright and clear in Columbus, Ohio, but the sunshine felt mocking against the darkness that had enveloped her family relationships. She stood in her cap and gown in the staging area behind the auditorium, surrounded by classmates buzzing with excitement and family celebration energy that highlighted her own isolation and heartbreak. Charlie had kept his word about not attending, choosing instead to spend the weekend hiking in the Cascade Mountains outside Seattle. He had sent her a brief text message that morning. "Congratulations on your achievement, Emma. Your success is earned through your own hard work and dedication. I hope you find peace in your accomplishments." The message was kind but distant, acknowledging her achievement while maintaining the emotional boundary he had established after their family's betrayal. Emma understood why he couldn't be present, but his absence created a hollow space in what should have been her most triumphant moment. Derek and Linda sat in the family section of the auditorium, looking uncomfortable and distracted despite their attempts to appear celebratory. Derek wore a suit that Emma now realized had been purchased with Charlie's money during one of their fabricated financial emergencies. Linda clutched a designer handbag that probably cost more than most families spent on a week of groceries, another symbol of the luxury lifestyle they had built through systematic deception. Throughout the ceremony, Emma watched her parents fidgeting nervously, checking their phones constantly for updates about their mounting legal troubles. The identity theft charges Charlie had filed were progressing through federal investigation channels, and their attorney had warned them to expect serious consequences, including potential prison time. During the ceremony, Derek's phone buzzed with a call from Ohio law enforcement. He stepped outside to take the call, returning 20 minutes later with a gray pallor that made Emma's stomach clench with anxiety. When she caught his eye, he shook his head slightly, indicating bad news that would be explained later. Emma's name was called, and she walked across the stage to receive her diploma while her parents applauded mechanically from the audience. The moment should have felt triumphant, but instead she felt numb, going through motions that seemed disconnected from any genuine emotion. Her achievement felt tainted by the knowledge that her education had been funded through criminal fraud committed against the brother she had rejected and betrayed. As class representative, Emma had been selected to deliver a closing speech to her graduating class and their families. She had prepared remarks about achievement, gratitude, and looking forward to future challenges. But standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of families celebrating together in loving unity, she found herself unable to deliver the sanitized speech she had written. "My fellow graduates," Emma began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium sound system. "Today we celebrate academic achievement, but I want to talk about a different kind of learning that some of us have experienced during our final semester." Her parents looked confused and increasingly worried as Emma deviated from her prepared remarks. Other families in the audience listened attentively, assuming this was a planned inspirational message about perseverance and growth. Sometimes the most important education happens outside classrooms, when we discover that people we trust have been lying to us, or when we realize that our own assumptions about love, loyalty, and family have been completely wrong. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger as she found her message. "I've learned that integrity isn't just an abstract concept we study in ethics courses. It's the foundation that makes every other achievement meaningful. Success built on deception, even when that deception is committed by people we love, cannot provide the satisfaction we hope to find." The audience remained attentive, many nodding as they interpreted her words as general wisdom about personal growth and moral development. But Derek and Linda understood that their daughter was publicly processing their betrayal, and their discomfort was visible to anyone watching carefully. "I've also learned about sacrifice and recognition," Emma said, looking directly at her parents. Sometimes the people who sacrifice most for our dreams are the ones we take for granted, while the people who claim credit for our success have actually contributed least to our achievement. Gratitude requires honest assessment of who truly supported us and who merely took credit for support provided by others. Linda shifted nervously in her seat, realizing that Emma's speech was becoming a public acknowledgement of Charlie's unrecognized contributions and their own false claims about sacrifice and support. Emma concluded with words that would haunt her parents for years. "I want to thank the person who believed in my dreams when no one else had the resources to support them, who sacrificed their own financial security for my education, and who received criticism and rejection in return for their generosity. That person's integrity and love made this day possible, even though they're not here to see it, because of mistakes and betrayals that broke our family apart." The applause that followed was enthusiastic but confused, as the audience wasn't sure whether they had heard an inspirational message or witnessed a family crisis being processed in public. Emma left the podium feeling emotionally drained, but finally honest about the reality of her situation. During the reception following the ceremony, extended family members and family friends approached Emma with congratulations that felt increasingly hollow. Her Aunt Sarah, who had driven from Cleveland for the ceremony, pulled Emma aside with concern about her unusual speech and her parents' obvious distress. "Honey, is everything okay with your family?" Sarah asked gently. "Your parents seem upset, and your speech sounded like you're dealing with some serious family problems." Emma found herself explaining the basic situation: Charlie's financial support for the family, her parents' systematic deception and criminal fraud, the manipulation that turned her against her brother, and the legal consequences that now threatened her parents' freedom. Sarah listened with increasing shock and horror as Emma described the scope of betrayal that had destroyed their family relationships. "Where is Charlie today?" Sarah asked. "If he's been supporting the family, why isn't he here celebrating with you?" Emma's voice broke as she answered. "He's not here because we told him we didn't want to see him." Mom said those exact words during a family video call. "I agreed with her because I believed their lies about him being controlling and selfish. I chose them over the person who was actually taking care of all of us." Sarah's expression shifted from concern to disappointment as she processed Emma's confession. "Emma, I've known your family since you were born. Charlie has always been generous and responsible even as a child. If your parents convinced you to reject him, they manipulated you into betraying someone who loves you." The graduation celebration dinner became a tense affair, with Derek and Linda attempting to maintain normalcy while dealing with constant stress about their legal situation. Emma found herself unable to enjoy the expensive meal, knowing it was paid for with money that might have been obtained through the same criminal fraud they had committed against Charlie. Halfway through dinner, Emma made a decision that shocked her parents and herself. She stood up from the table, announced that she could not accept graduation gifts or celebration expenses paid for with stolen money, and apologized publicly to someone who believed in my dreams when no one else could afford to support them. Without further explanation, Emma left the restaurant, drove to the Columbus airport, and purchased a ticket to Seattle using money she had saved from her part-time campus job. Her parents sat abandoned at their table, facing the judgment of extended family members who were beginning to understand the scope of their criminal behavior. Emma's flight to Seattle represented more than physical travel. It was a journey toward honesty, accountability, and the hope that she could somehow repair the damage her family's deception had created with the person who had sacrificed most for her future. Emma arrived at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at 11:30 p.m. carrying only a small overnight bag and the weight of her family's massive deception. She had never visited Charlie's apartment building, but she found his address through old emails and took a taxi through the unfamiliar city streets while rehearsing apologies that felt inadequate for the magnitude of betrayal she needed to address. Charlie's apartment complex was modern and well-maintained, reflecting the professional success he had achieved through hard work and dedication. Emma sat on a bench in the lobby for 3 hours, Knowing that showing up unannounced in the middle of the night would be inappropriate, but unable to bring herself to leave without attempting to repair their fractured relationship. At 7 a.m., she positioned herself near the building entrance, hoping to intercept Charlie on his way to work. When he emerged from the elevator in business attire, she barely recognized the composed, distant man he had become. Gone was the warm, approachable brother she remembered. In his place stood someone who carried himself with protective boundaries and guarded emotions. "Emma," Charlie said quietly, his surprise evident but not welcoming. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you." Emma replied, her voice shaking with exhaustion and emotion. "I know you don't owe me anything, and I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I need you to help me understand how to fix what we've broken." Charlie studied her face for a long moment, recognizing genuine distress rather than manipulation tactics he had learned to identify from their parents. "I have to go to work, but you can walk with me to my car. You have 5 minutes to explain why you flew across the country." As they walked toward the parking garage, Emma began the most difficult conversation of her life. She described discovering the truth about her tuition cancellation, confronting their parents with Charlie's evidence, and learning the full scope of their criminal behavior and manipulation tactics. "They told me everything," Emma said through tears. "The luxury purchases while claiming poverty, the loans they took out in your name, the house they bought in Ohio with stolen money. But worst of all, they admitted to deliberately turning me against you with months of strategic lies about your character and motivations." Charlie listened without interruption, his expression remaining neutral as Emma detailed her parents' confessions. When she finished, he stopped walking and looked directly at her for the first time since she had arrived. "What do you want from me, Emma?" Charlie asked bluntly. "An opportunity to apologize forgiveness for participating in their betrayal financial support to replace what they can no longer provide? I need to understand your purpose before I decide whether to continue this conversation." Emma was struck by her brother's directness and the obvious pain beneath his controlled demeanor. She realized that her arrival might seem like another manipulation attempt given her history of supporting their parents' narratives against him. "I don't want your money," Emma said firmly. "I don't want you to drop charges against our parents or pretend their crimes didn't happen. I want to understand how you developed the integrity and independence that kept you from becoming like them. I want to learn how to rebuild my life without relying on anyone else's resources or sacrifices." This response seemed to surprise Charlie, as he had expected requests for financial assistance or emotional support rather than guidance towards self-reliance. He studied Emma's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but finding only genuine remorse and determination. Charlie unlocked his car, but didn't get in immediately. "Emma, do you understand that our parents' behavior wasn't just financial fraud? They systematically manipulated your emotions and perceptions to isolate me from your support. You weren't just a passive victim. You actively participated in rejecting me when I needed family loyalty most." "I know," Emma whispered. "I can't undo choosing them over you during that terrible phone call. I can't take back believing their lies about your character instead of trusting what I had seen with my own eyes for years. I betrayed someone who loved me enough to sacrifice his financial security for my dreams, and I did it because I was too naive to recognize manipulation when it was happening to me." Charlie's protective walls seemed to crack slightly as he heard genuine accountability rather than excuses or deflection. Emma wasn't minimizing her role in the betrayal or blaming her parents entirely for her own choices. "There's something else you need to know," Charlie said quietly. "The investigation into their fraud has expanded beyond my original complaints. Federal agents discovered that our parents were running similar identity theft schemes against other family members and acquaintances. Uncle Robert's credit was compromised. Cousin Jennifer had loans taken out in her name. They've been systematically defrauding people for years using family relationships to gain access to personal information. Emma felt nauseous as she processed this information. Her parents weren't desperate people who made poor choices during temporary hardship. They were career criminals who had perfected techniques for exploiting trust and manipulating family relationships for financial gain. They're facing federal charges that could result in significant prison time, Charlie continued. Multiple victims, multiple states' systematic fraud over several years. The house purchase in Ohio was just the latest phase of a long-term criminal enterprise. Emma leaned against Charlie's car, overwhelmed by the scope of her parents' criminal behavior and her own naive participation in protecting them from consequences they had earned through deliberate choices. How do I live with knowing that I was raised by people capable of such calculated cruelty? Emma asked. How do I trust my own judgment when I was so completely fooled by people I thought I knew better than anyone? Charlie's expression softened slightly as he recognized Emma's genuine struggle with the psychological impact of discovering that her foundational relationships were built on lies and manipulation. Emma, you were raised by people who taught you to prioritize loyalty over truth and emotional comfort over accountability, Charlie said. Breaking free from those patterns requires conscious effort and probably professional help. But the fact that you're asking these questions suggests you're capable of developing healthier relationship skills. For the first time since Emma's arrival, Charlie seemed willing to extend their conversation beyond polite courtesy. I'm not ready to restore our relationship to what it was before, and I may never be able to trust you the way I once did. But if you're serious about learning independence and accountability, I'm willing to provide guidance while you prove your commitment to those principles. Emma felt a small spark of hope mixed with realistic understanding of the long road ahead. Charlie was offering her an opportunity to rebuild their relationship on new terms, but only if she demonstrated genuine change rather than temporary remorse. 8 months later, I stood in the visitor parking lot of the federal courthouse in Columbus, Ohio, watching my parents emerge from their sentencing hearing in handcuffs. Derek received 18 months in federal prison, while Linda was sentenced to 2 years due to her leadership role in the identity theft scheme that had ultimately victimized 7 family members and 12 acquaintances over 4 years. I felt no satisfaction watching them led away to begin their prison terms, but I experienced a profound sense of closure, knowing that their systematic criminal behavior had finally faced appropriate consequences. The investigation had recovered most of the stolen money and prevented them from completing the Ohio house purchase that would have consumed additional fraudulent proceeds. Emma stood beside me in the parking lot, having attended the sentencing hearing, to witness the conclusion of our family's legal crisis. She looked older and more serious than the naive college student who had sided against me during that devastating Zoom call, transformed by months of therapy and independent living that had taught her to recognize manipulation and build healthy boundaries. After graduation, Emma had moved to Seattle and found work as a medical scribe while saving money for medical school applications. She insisted on paying her own rent, buying her own food, and covering every expense without assistance from me or anyone else. I watched her struggle financially during those first months, working 2 jobs while living in a studio apartment that barely fit her belongings, but I respected her determination to prove her independence and reliability. The most meaningful part of Emma's transformation was her commitment to therapy, where she worked with a counselor who specialized in family manipulation and emotional abuse recovery. Through those sessions, Emma learned to identify the manipulation tactics our parents had used against both of us, understanding how their systematic lies had shaped her perceptions and damaged her ability to trust her own judgment. Emma began sharing insights from her therapy sessions with me, helping us both understand the family dynamics that had enabled years of dysfunction and exploitation. She learned to recognize when people used guilt, fear, or obligation to influence her decisions, developing skills to evaluate relationships based on actual behavior rather than emotional manipulation. Our own relationship rebuilt slowly based on Emma's consistent actions rather than promises or apologies. She proved her commitment to honesty by acknowledging uncomfortable truths about her past choices, taking responsibility for the pain her betrayal had caused, and demonstrating through daily behavior that she had learned to prioritize integrity over emotional comfort. I discovered that Emma's presence in Seattle enriched my life in unexpected ways. She introduced me to hiking trails I hadn't explored, cooking techniques she had learned during her independent months, and perspectives on family relationships that helped me process my own healing journey. We developed inside jokes, shared experiences, and gradual trust that felt more mature and stable than our previous sibling dynamic. My professional life flourished during this period of personal healing and boundary establishment. Removing the constant stress of family financial crises allowed me to focus fully on my career, leading to a promotion that came with substantial salary increases and stock options. My colleagues who had watched me struggle with family stress for years noticed the positive changes in my energy and productivity. I also began dating Sarah, a colleague who had supported me during the worst months of family crisis, without trying to fix my situation or pressure me toward premature forgiveness. Sarah appreciated my kindness without exploiting it, and she demonstrated through her own behavior the qualities I had learned to value: honesty, independence, mutual respect, and emotional maturity. The most significant development occurred when Emma graduated from her medical scribe program and received acceptance to 2 medical schools, with partial scholarships she had earned through her own academic excellence and community service. She had applied without mentioning our family's financial support, focusing instead on her individual achievements and personal statement about developing resilience through adversity. On the day Emma received her acceptance letter, she called me with genuine excitement that felt completely different from the entitled expectations I remembered from our parents' manipulation era. Her joy was untainted by assumptions about my financial support or guilt about deserving assistance she hadn't earned. "Charlie, I got into both schools," Emma said, her voice shaking with excitement. "The scholarship covers 60% of tuition, and I've been approved for student loans to cover the rest. I can actually become a doctor without depending on anyone else's sacrifices." I felt proud of Emma's achievement and her commitment to independence, recognizing that her success felt more meaningful because she had earned it through her own effort rather than my financial support. We celebrated with dinner at a restaurant Emma chose and paid for with money she had earned through her own work. 3 years later, I attended Emma's medical school graduation as she received her Doctor of Medicine degree. She had excelled academically while working part-time to minimize her debt burden, developing skills and confidence that came from personal achievement rather than family support. Her graduation speech thanked the people who loved me enough to let me learn difficult lessons and become who I was meant to be rather than who I thought I should be. After the ceremony, Emma introduced me to her classmates and professors as her brother, who had taught her about integrity, independence, and the difference between enabling and supporting. She spoke about me with genuine respect and gratitude that felt earned, rather than obligatory, acknowledging my influence on her character development without minimizing her own responsibility for change. Our parents were released from federal prison during Emma's final year of medical school, but neither Emma nor I maintained contact with them. They had served their sentences and completed court-ordered financial counseling, but they showed little evidence of understanding the emotional damage their manipulation had caused beyond their criminal behavior. Derek and Linda moved to a small apartment in Ohio, finding low-wage employment, and beginning the process of rebuilding their lives without the financial fraud that had supported their previous lifestyle. They occasionally sent cards on holidays, but their messages focused on their own hardships rather than genuine accountability for the pain they had caused. Emma and I both understood that our parents' criminal behavior was a symptom of deeper character issues that prison sentences couldn't address. We wished them well, but recognized that healthy relationships require mutual respect, honesty, and emotional safety that they had never demonstrated and seemed unlikely to develop. On Emma's graduation day, as I watched her receive recognition for academic excellence and community service leadership, I realized that our family's crisis had ultimately strengthened the relationships worth preserving while removing toxic influences that had prevented authentic connection. Emma had learned to build relationships based on integrity rather than manipulation, to value support that enhanced her independence rather than creating dependence, and to recognize the difference between love and exploitation. These skills would serve her well in her medical career and personal relationships. I had learned that protecting myself from exploitation wasn't selfish, but necessary for maintaining the emotional and financial resources needed to support people who genuinely deserved help. Setting boundaries with manipulative people created space for authentic relationships with people who shared my values and treated me with respect. Both Emma and I discovered that family relationships built on honesty, mutual respect, and reciprocal support felt more satisfying and stable than connections maintained through guilt, obligation, or financial dependence. We'd created a new family dynamic based on choice rather than blood relation, proving that healthy relationships require ongoing effort rather than automatic loyalty. As I hugged Emma after her graduation ceremony, I felt grateful for the painful journey that had taught us both to recognize and create authentic love rather than accepting manipulation disguised as family loyalty. We had lost parents, but gained integrity, independence, and a sibling relationship built on genuine respect and earned trust. The person I had become through surviving family betrayal was stronger, wiser, and more capable of recognizing healthy relationships than the naive young man who had moved his family across the country, believing that generosity alone could fix their dysfunction. Emma had become a confident, independent woman who understood her own worth and refused to accept treatment that didn't reflect her value. Sometimes the most loving thing family members can do is allow each other to face the consequences of their choices and learn the lessons that growth requires, even when that process involves temporary pain and permanent change in family dynamics. Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about supporting family members whose behavior didn't match their words? How did you balance love and loyalty with protecting your own well-being? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with your own experiences, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family relationships. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding the difference between healthy support and enabling destructive behavior. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you recognize the value of integrity and authentic relationships in your own life.